My name is Genevieve Hayes, and I am 81 years old. For 62 of those years, I was known as Sister Agnes. I lived in a world of quiet stone, whispered prayers, and the scent of old wax and floor polish. I was the picture of devotion. My hands, now spotted and twisted with arthritis, were once folded in perfect, serene prayer. My voice, now a dry rasp, once led the Vespers choir. The younger sisters would come to me for guidance, their faces open and full of a faith I had to borrow, like a costume, every single morning. They saw my peace. They saw my stillness. What they never saw, what no one ever saw, was the rot of a lie I'd kept hidden beneath the habit, a secret so heavy it should have crushed my ribs decades ago. I became a nun, but I never once, not for a single second, believed in God. I am not in the convent now. I am sitting in a small, beige-walled apartment in a subsidized senior living community just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I left St. Catherine's 3 weeks ago, walking out the heavy oak doors with a single cardboard box. Inside was a change of clothes, a photograph I hadn't looked at in half a century, and a letter from a lawyer. That letter is why I'm speaking now, into this small digital recorder. It's a confession, I suppose. Not to a priest in a dark booth, but to the world. A confession demanded not by God, but by the only person I ever truly wronged. My brother, Elias. The brother whose life I destroyed on a hot, dry Tuesday in 1959. The brother who just died, a stranger to me, and left me with one final, impossible command. We were ranch kids. Our world wasn't big, but it was absolute. It was the red dirt of Oklahoma, the endless stretch of sky, and the iron-fisted rule of our father, Thomas Hayes. He was a hard man, chiseled from the same rock and disappointment as the land he worked. Our mother had passed when I was 6, leaving me and Elias, who was 3 years older, to navigate our father's silent, simmering rages. Elias was the heir. He was built for that life, strong, quiet, and dutiful. He had our father's broad shoulders and our mother's kind eyes. I was different. I was small, bookish, and full of a restless energy our father despised. He called it fidgeting. He called me useless. While Elias learned to mend fences and birth calves, I hid in the hayloft, reading stolen books and dreaming of a world that wasn't covered in dust. The summer I turned 19 was the driest on record. The air was thick with heat, and the ranch was dying. The cattle were thin, the creek was a cracked ribbon of mud, and our father's temper was a wildfire waiting for a spark. He and Elias fought constantly. Elias, now 22, had ideas about irrigation, about selling off part of the herd, about modernizing. My father saw this as weakness, as a betrayal of the old ways. I'd lie in my bed at night, the thin walls doing nothing to muffle their shouting. "You're a fool, boy," my father would roar. "You'll lose this place, just like you lose everything else." And Elias, his voice tight with frustration, would just say, "The world is changing, Pa. We have to change with it." I hated them both in those moments. I hated my father for his cruelty and Elias for his refusal to just leave me, and us, alone. The secret, the lie, started with something small. Something pathetic. It started with a pack of cigarettes and a bad grade. I was taking a correspondence course from a community college, a secret I kept hidden under my mattress. I'd failed my algebra midterm. I knew if my father found it, he would stop paying for the course, maybe even forbid me from reading altogether. He saw education for a woman as a waste of money we didn't have. So, I decided to burn it. I stole a cigarette from my father's pack, I'd started smoking in secret, another tiny, pathetic rebellion, and went to the place I always went to hide. The old dry storage barn, the one filled with last season's hay, old tack, and cans of gasoline and turpentine for the equipment. It was stupid. It was the act of a bored, foolish girl in the middle of a drought. I lit the corner of the algebra paper. It flared up, bright and fast. But a spark, a single, tiny ember, leaped from the paper and landed on a loose pile of hay. It was instant. The hay didn't just burn, it exploded. The air sucked out of the barn in a rush, and a wall of orange flame roared up in front of me. I screamed. I threw the rest of the burning paper and tried to stomp out the fire, but it was like trying to stomp out the sun. It was moving faster than I could think, climbing the dry wooden walls, racing toward the shelf with the gas cans. I didn't think about Elias, or my father, or the ranch. I just thought about myself. I thought about being blamed. So I ran. I ran out the back of the barn, scrambled under a fence, and circled back to the house, heart hammering against my ribs. I sat on the porch, picked up my book, and waited, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't even read the words. It took 3 minutes for Elias to smell the smoke. He came running from the paddock, shouting, "Pa! Jenna! The barn!" He grabbed a bucket, but it was useless. By the time he got close, the whole structure was a tower of black and orange smoke. My father burst out of the house, his face a mask of disbelief. And then he saw it. The shelf. The gas cans. They exploded. The sound was a physical blow, knocking us both back. The force of it blew the main doors off their hinges. Elias, who had been closest, was thrown back, his shirt on fire. My father, right behind him, took the full force of the blast. He was engulfed in flames. I watched, frozen on the porch, as my brother, screaming, beat the fire out on his own arms and then threw himself on top of our father, trying to smother the flames with his own body. My father didn't die that day. He died 2 weeks later, in a hospital bed, a mummy of white bandages. He was in too much pain to speak, but his eyes never left Elias. The sheriff had come. He'd asked questions. And Elias, his own arms raw with burns, had no answers. "I don't know," he kept saying. "I was in the paddock. Maybe a spark from the tractor? I was working on it earlier. And that was it. That was the hook." My father, in his silent, agonized state, seized on it. The tractor. Elias's responsibility. Elias's fault. I stood by the hospital bed, a silent, 19-year-old girl, and listened as my father, in a voice scraped raw by fire and hate, whispered his last words to my brother. "You, careless, fool. You burned it all. You burned me. You get nothing." He died that night. And I, Genevieve Hayes, the girl who loved books, said nothing. The fallout was immediate. My father, in a rage-filled addendum to his will just before he died, had disinherited Elias. He left everything, the dying ranch, the mountains of debt, the burnt-out shell of the barn, to me. To me. The useless one. It was his final, cruelest joke. Elias, scorched by our father's flames and burned even deeper by his words, didn't even stay for the funeral. He looked at me across the hospital room, his kind eyes now hollow and dead. "He believed it, Jenna," he whispered. "He really believed I did it." I couldn't meet his gaze. I just stared at my shoes. He waited. He waited for me to say something, to defend him, to tell the truth. And I stayed silent. The weight of that silence pressed down on my chest, a physical, iron weight. He packed a bag that night, took the $40 he had in a jar, and walked off the ranch. I never saw him again. I was left alone. 19 years old, with a ranch I couldn't run and a guilt so profound it made me sick. The neighbors, the few we had, looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. The bank began foreclosure proceedings. I was a pariah. I was the girl whose father and brother were both gone in a cloud of smoke. I started hearing whispers in town, that Elias was reckless, that he'd had a fight with his father and set the fire on purpose. The lie grew legs, and it ran. And I, the only one who knew the truth, locked myself in the house and prayed to a God I didn't believe in to just make it all stop. I prayed for oblivion. I prayed for a way to disappear, to erase the girl who had burned her whole world down over a bad grade. Salvation, or at least a place to hide, came in the form of Father Michael, our local priest. He found me a week later, sitting on the porch of a house the bank now owned. I was malnourished, half-mad with guilt, and had nowhere to go. He saw a soul in crisis, a young woman shattered by family tragedy. He offered me a path. "The world is too much for you right now, child," he said, his voice soft. "There is a place of peace, of contemplation. The Sisters of St. Catherine. They take in young women who feel a calling, who need a quiet place to serve God and heal." I looked at him, my eyes dry. I wasn't healing. I was a wound. And I didn't feel a calling. I felt a running. It was the perfect escape. A place where no one knew my name, where I could be punished with hard work and silence for the rest of my life. A fortress where the truth could never find me. I told him yes. I told him I felt the call of God. It was the second great lie of my life. He made the arrangements. The church, in its charity, bought the ranch from the bank for pennies on the dollar, absorbing the land into its own holdings. I signed the papers, a ghost at my own execution. I was given a bus ticket to the convent, 3 states away. As I stepped onto that bus, leaving the red dust of my home behind forever, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel forgiven. I just felt empty. I was no longer Genevieve Hayes. I was a vacuum. A hollow space, defined only by the secret I was carrying. I was running to a lifetime of penance to a God I knew wasn't listening, all to escape the judgment of a brother I knew I would, and should, burn in hell for. Entering the convent of St. Catherine was like stepping into a photograph from another century. The air was cold, even in summer, and smelled of stone and lemon oil. The silence was the first thing that struck me. It wasn't just quiet, it was an enforced silence, a thick, heavy blanket that smothered every sound. There were no radios, no televisions, no idle chatter. The only sounds were the shuffling of woolen robes on stone floors, the distant clang of a pot in the kitchen, and the rhythmic drone of prayer. For a girl running from a truth that screamed in her head, this silence was not a comfort. It was an amplifier. It was a torture chamber designed to make me listen to nothing but my own guilt, day after day, for 62 years. They took my name first. Genevieve Hayes is the girl of the world, the Mother Superior, a woman named Beatrice with eyes like chips of ice, told me. "You will be Sister Agnes now. You will be a bride of Christ." I wanted to laugh. I, a bride? I was a fugitive. They took my clothes, the simple cotton dress I'd worn on the bus, and gave me the postulant's uniform, a plain, shapeless black dress, thick stockings, and heavy, ugly shoes. My hair was cut short, then covered by a stiff white cap. I looked at myself in the small, warped mirror in my new room, they called it a cell, and a stranger stared back. She was pale, haunted, and plain. I was invisible. It was exactly what I wanted. I thought, I can do this. I can disappear. I can serve my sentence. Life was a machine of prayer and work. We rose at 4:30 a.m. for vigils, our voices chanting Latin in a chapel lit only by candles, our breath fogging in the cold. My mind, sharp and restless, refused to find peace. While the other sisters closed their eyes and saw the face of God, I saw the face of my father, skin blackened and melting. I saw Elias, his kind eyes dead with betrayal. I'd mouthed the words, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, but in my head, I was screaming, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. It was a prayer, I suppose, but not to God. It was to my brother. After prayers was a breakfast of thin oatmeal and weak coffee, eaten in absolute silence. Then, work. My penance. The Mother Superior seemed to sense the frantic, guilty energy buzzing under my skin, and she assigned me the hardest, most punishing tasks. I scrubbed the great stone floors of the cloister on my hands and knees, my knuckles cracking and bleeding in the harsh lye soap. I worked in the kitchens, peeling hundreds of pounds of potatoes until my hands cramped into claws. I tended the furnace in the deep, spider-filled basement, shoveling coal until my arms felt like they would fall off. I welcomed the pain. I craved it. Every ache, every blister, every moment of exhaustion was a small payment on an impossible debt. The other sisters, especially a kind, round-faced girl my age named Sister Clara, would look at me with pity. "You work too hard, Sister Agnes," she'd whisper during our brief recreation hour. "You must pray for grace, not just for strength." I would just nod. How could I tell her? How could I say that I didn't want grace? I wanted punishment. The years blurred. Postulant became novice, novice became a fully professed nun. I took my final vows, poverty, chastity, and obedience, in a grand ceremony. I lay prostrate on the cold stone floor, a black veil placed over my head, symbolizing my death to the world. It was a performance. I felt nothing but the hard floor against my cheek and the familiar, cold knot of my secret in my stomach. But I was a good actress. I learned to fold my hands just so. I learned to lower my eyes, to speak in a soft, reverent tone. I learned the rhythms of the Mass, the hierarchy of the saints, the entire, complex language of a faith I did not share. I became the most reliable, the most pious, the most serene sister in the convent. My guilt, you see, made me a perfect nun. It made me punctual. It made me diligent. It made me silent. Decades passed. The 1960s raged outside our walls, but in the convent, it was always 1850. The 1970s, 80s, 90s, they were just rumors, whispers from the outside world when new, younger sisters would join. My one friend, Sister Clara, passed away from cancer in 1994. I held her hand as she died, and she looked at me, her eyes clouded with morphine but still so clear. "You'll be okay, Agnes," she whispered. "He knows your heart. He's already forgiven you." Her words were meant as a comfort, but they were like a knife. She died believing I was a saint, tormented by some small, spiritual doubt. She never knew I was a monster, tormented by a concrete, bloody sin. I wept at her funeral, the only time I ever cried in that place. I wasn't crying for her. I was crying for me, for the crushing loneliness of my lie. I grew old. My black veil turned white, as was the custom for senior sisters. I was put in charge of the convent's library, a quiet, dusty room that became my only real sanctuary. I read history, philosophy, even old, forgotten novels. I read about the world I had abandoned. I read about families, about brothers and sisters, about forgiveness. And with every page, the face of Elias, frozen in my memory as a 22-year-old man, grew clearer. I often wondered if he was alive. If he'd found happiness. If he'd married, had children. If he ever thought of me. I hoped he didn't. I hoped he had forgotten me, the way you forget a fever or a bad dream. To be remembered by him would be a curse I couldn't bear. Then, 3 weeks ago, the letter arrived. The Mother Superior, a new one, younger than my time in the convent, called me to her office. She looked confused. "Sister Agnes, this came for you. From an estate lawyer." My heart, a dry, dormant thing, gave a painful lurch. I opened it. The legal language was dense, but the words were simple. Elias Hayes. Deceased. He had died. He was 84. My brother was gone. I sat down, the paper rattling in my shaking hands. He had lived a whole life, and I had missed it. The lawyer stated that Elias had been tracking me, or at least my location, for years. He knew where I was. He had been a carpenter in Austin, Texas. He had a daughter. A daughter. My niece. And then, the final command. The impossible part. Elias had left no money. He had nothing to give, except a small box and a condition. His will stipulated that I, Genevieve Hayes, he used my real name, was to be the executor. The entire inheritance, such as it was contingent on one thing. I had to leave the convent. I had to find his daughter, a woman named Olivia Hayes. And I had to deliver the box to her personally. But that wasn't all. The lawyer was very clear on the last point. I was not just to deliver the box. I was to deliver the truth. Elias's will stated, in his own handwriting, a single sentence that cut through 62 years of stone and silence: find my daughter. Give her what I've left. And tell her why I left. Tell her the truth, Genevieve. For once in your life, you tell the truth. Walking out of the convent of St. Catherine was the second most terrifying moment of my life. The first, of course, was the fire. This was a different kind of terror. It was the terror of a deep-sea creature being pulled suddenly to the surface. The light was too bright. The air was too loud. The Mother Superior had given me my release from my vows, a shockingly simple piece of paper, and a small envelope with $500, my share, she'd called it, from the convent's meager discretionary fund. I stood on the sidewalk in a simple black dress, the only civilian clothing they had, holding my single cardboard box. I was 81 years old, and I had never held a dollar bill. I had never used a telephone. I had never seen a computer, a credit card, or a car made after 1959. The lawyer had arranged for a taxi. A young man with kind eyes helped me with my box. The car, a bright yellow, was cleaner than I expected. But the inside, it was a box of noise and magic. A woman's voice was coming from a small screen, giving directions. The driver tapped the screen with his finger. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked. I gave him the address of the senior living facility, a place the lawyer had found for me, a transitional apartment paid for by what little was in Elias's estate. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the convent. The stone walls looked gray and sad. For 62 years, that building had been my cage, my fortress, and my tomb. I had hated it. But as I watched it disappear, I felt a terrifying, gut-wrenching wave of homesickness. I had left the only home I had ever known. The car moved at speeds that felt impossible. The world outside the window was a blur of colors, glass, and metal. Everyone was staring at little glowing rectangles in their hands. They held them to their ears. They talked to them. They were everywhere. The sheer volume of the world was overwhelming. The music from the car's radio, the roar of other vehicles, the chatter of people on sidewalks, it was a physical assault. In the convent, my world was 200 square yards of stone and garden. This world was endless, fast, and terrifyingly bright. I must have looked pale, because the driver glanced at me in his mirror. "You okay, ma'am? You look like you just saw a ghost." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I whispered, like I am a ghost. My new apartment was one small room, with a smaller kitchen and a bathroom. It was beige. Everything was beige. The carpet, the walls, the stiff sofa. But it had wonders. It had a large screen on the wall, a television, I learned. It had a telephone with no cord. It had a magic box in the kitchen that, with the push of a button, heated a cup of tea in 30 seconds. I spent the first 2 days just existing. I was too afraid to go outside. The lawyer, a kind woman named Ms. Alvarez, visited me. She brought me a file. "This is everything we have on Olivia Hayes," she said, her voice gentle, as if speaking to a child. "Your niece. She lives in Austin, Texas. That's about an 8-hour bus ride from here." A bus. The word hit me like a stone. The last time I was on a bus, I was 19, running for my life, my hands still smelling faintly of smoke. Now I would be taking another bus, to finish the journey I started all those years ago. Ms. Alvarez explained, very slowly, how I would buy a ticket, where the bus station was, and how to use money. She showed me the inheritance, a small, sturdy wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, sealed with tape. "This is for Olivia," she said. "And this," she handed me a debit card, "is for you. Elias left a small bank account with just enough for your travel and a few months' rent. It's not much." He wasn't a wealthy man. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the box. It felt impossibly heavy in my hands. It was the physical weight of my brother's entire, stolen life. That night, I tried to sleep, but the sounds of the apartment building, the television in the next room, the flush of a toilet upstairs, kept me awake. I was alone. In the convent, I was never truly alone. I was surrounded by the breathing, shuffling, coughing sounds of 50 other women. This new silence was worse than the convent's. This was the silence of emptiness. The silence of being 81 years old and having no one in the entire, wide world who knew my name. I was just an old woman in a beige room. The empowerment I thought I'd feel, the freedom, it wasn't there. There was just fear and the crushing weight of the task ahead. I had to find a stranger. A woman who was my only living family. And I had to tell her that I was the reason her father's life was a ruin. How do you even start that conversation? "Hello, I am your aunt, the one you never knew existed. I'm here to tell you that I'm the monster who destroyed your father." The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror in the small bathroom. I was wearing a pair of simple gray slacks and a blue blouse Ms. Alvarez had bought for me. My hair, which had been white and short for decades, felt strange without the veil. I looked old. I looked like any other old woman. I was no longer Sister Agnes. The uniform was gone. The title was gone. The walls were gone. There was nothing left to hide behind. It was just me, Genevieve Hayes, and the truth. I picked up the small bag Ms. Alvarez had given me. I put the wooden box inside. I took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel like it was being stolen by stone walls, and walked out the door, into the bright, terrifying, modern world. I was going to find my niece. I was going to finish this. The bus station was a hurricane of human misery. It smelled of stale coffee, exhaust fumes, and unwashed bodies. It was loud, a chaos of announcements I couldn't understand, people shouting into their glowing rectangles, and babies crying. I clutched my bag to my chest, the wooden box inside feeling like an anchor. I felt my convent-trained instinct to retreat, to find a quiet corner, to lower my eyes and fold my hands. But there was no quiet corner. There was just the press of bodies, the impatient looks, the feeling of being utterly, dangerously out of place. Ms. Alvarez had bought my ticket online, another piece of magic, and I just had to show a printout to a woman behind a glass screen. She barely looked at me. Gate 4. Boards in 20 minutes. I found Gate 4 and sat on a hard plastic bench. The bus ride from Oklahoma to Texas. The journey felt symbolic. I was traveling south, back toward the heat, back toward the kind of land that had defined my sin. The bus that pulled up was sleek and modern, not like the rattling metal box I'd taken in 1959. I climbed the steps, my old knees aching, and found a seat by a large window. I watched the city of Tulsa slip away, the tall glass buildings giving way to strip malls, then highways, then, finally, the open, flat land that I recognized. The red dirt. The endless sky. The land I had run from. As the bus settled into a steady hum on the highway, the past came rushing back, as vivid as if it were happening right in the seat next to me. The bus ride to the convent. I was 19. I had one small suitcase, $15, and the clothes I was wearing. I remember I sat in the back, terrified someone from my town would get on and recognize me. Every stop made my heart jump. I stared out the window for 2 days, not eating, not sleeping. I watched the red earth of Oklahoma turn into the green hills of Missouri, and I felt like I was dying. I was shedding my skin, my name, my family. I was becoming a ghost, a hollow thing, defined only by what I was leaving behind. I was running from my brother. Now, 62 years later, I was on another bus, running to him. Or at least, to the ghost he'd left behind. I must have dozed off, because I woke to the bus slowing. We were at a rest stop. People shuffled off to use the facilities and buy snacks. I stayed in my seat. I had no idea how to buy anything. I just watched. I saw a mother with her 2 children. She was scolding her son, then pulling him in for a hug, kissing the top of his head. I saw a young couple, holding hands, sharing a bag of chips and laughing. I saw a man, about Elias's age when he left, traveling alone, staring into the distance with a tired, lonely look in his eyes. I had missed all of this. For 62 years, I had lived in a world without family, without touch, without laughter, without the simple, messy, beautiful details of life. My self-imposed penance, I realized, hadn't just cost me my own life. It had cost me the idea of life. I thought about my first year in the convent. The brutal cold. The loneliness. The sheer, physical agony of the work. I remembered scrubbing the chapel floor in the dead of winter. The water in the bucket was icy, and the lye soap ate at the skin on my hands. I was weeping, not from the pain, but from the guilt. I was scrubbing, trying to wash away the image of the fire, the smell of the smoke, the sound of my father's last, rasping words. Mother Superior Beatrice found me. She didn't offer a kind word. She just looked at my raw, red hands and the dirty water. Tears will not clean this floor, postulant, she said, her voice like ice. And they will not clean your soul. Only work and prayer will do that. Get back to it. She was wrong. All the work in the world, all the prayers I'd pretended to say, had not cleaned a single thing. The stain was still there, and it was in the box in my lap. The bus pulled into Austin, Texas, as the sun was setting. The city was alive. It was a riot of color, lights, and music. Unlike Tulsa, which felt like a quiet, manageable town, Austin felt like a different planet. The bus station was even bigger, even louder. I was truly, completely lost. I fumbled for the piece of paper Ms. Alvarez had given me. The address. I showed it to a taxi driver, my hand shaking. Yeah, I know where that is, Grandma, he said, taking my small bag. Hop in. The ride was a blur of neon signs, restaurants with people sitting outside, and a river of cars. He dropped me at an old, 2-story apartment building in a neighborhood that looked like it had seen better days. This is it, he said. I paid him, my hands fumbling with the debit card he'd shown me how to use. I walked up to the door. Apartment 2B. The name on the mailbox was faded, but I could just make it out. Oh, Hayes. My heart was beating so fast I thought it might fail. This was it. I was here. I had crossed the desert of 62 years. I raised a trembling hand and knocked on the door. I waited. Nothing. I knocked again, louder. Hello? Olivia? A dog barked inside, but there was no other sound. A neighbor, a young woman with bright purple hair and a ring in her nose, poked her head out of the next door. You looking for Liv? She asked. Yeah, she moved out. Like, 3-4 months ago. Broke her lease and everything. My stomach dropped. Moved? Do you know where she went? The woman shrugged. No idea. She split pretty fast. Seemed upset. Sorry. She closed her door. I was alone, on a dark porch, in a strange city, 800 miles from my beige room, with a dead-end address. I was too late. I had failed him again. For a full minute, I just stood there on that porch. The weight of my 81 years, the 8-hour bus ride, the shock of this new world, it all came crashing down on me. My first instinct, the one honed by 62 years of failure, was to retreat. I could go back to the bus station. I could go back to my beige room in Tulsa. I could live out my last few months in the quiet, sterile silence I was used to. I could die Sister Agnes, the failure. I looked down at the bag in my hand. At the box. Tell her the truth, Genevieve. Elias's words. It wasn't a request. It was a command. He had known, somehow, that this would be hard. He was testing me. After all these years, he was finally testing me to see if I would run again. I took a deep, shuddering breath. No, I whispered to the empty porch. Not this time. I turned to the neighbor's door, the one with the purple-haired girl. I knocked again. She opened it, looking annoyed. I told you, please, I interrupted, my voice shaking but firm. I am her great-aunt. I've come a very long way. Her father, my brother, he passed away. I have an inheritance for her. It's important. Did she work somewhere? A coffee shop? A store? Anything? The girl's expression softened from annoyance to pity. An old woman, family, a death. That was a story she could understand. Oh. Wow. That's heavy, she said. Yeah, she worked. She was a barista. A place downtown called the Daily Grind. I don't know if she's still there, but it's a start. She gave me the name of the street. I thanked her, my heart pounding a new, fragile rhythm. Hope. It felt strange. Finding a hotel was my next challenge. I had to use the glowing rectangle Ms. Alvarez had given me, a smartphone. She had programmed the number for a rideshare service. I felt impossibly foolish, an old woman jabbing at a screen, but a car appeared, just like magic. I asked the driver to take me to a simple, inexpensive hotel near the coffee shop. He dropped me at a clean, tall building. The check-in process was another trial by fire, sliding the plastic card, signing a screen, but I managed. My room was small, high up, and had a massive window overlooking the city. The lights of Austin glittered like a fallen sky. It was beautiful, and it made me feel smaller and more alone than I ever had in my life. I sat on the bed, holding the box, and just watched the cars move, like blood cells through a glowing, alien body. The next morning, I found the Daily Grind. It was loud, smelled of burned coffee and sugar, and was full of young people typing furiously on their own glowing screens. I sat at a small table in the corner, my hands folded in my lap. I was invisible again, but in a new way. I wasn't a nun. I was just an old woman, and the world was simply too busy to see me. I ordered a tea from a young man who called me Han, and I waited. I waited for 4 hours. I watched the baristas, young, fast, tattooed. None of them were Olivia. Finally, I got up, my knees stiff, and approached the counter. "Excuse me," I said to the young man. "I'm looking for someone." A woman named Olivia Hayes. She used to work here. He looked blank for a moment, then nodded. "Oh, Liv?" "Yeah, she quit. Maybe a month ago?" Said she got a new gig. Better pay. My heart sank again. Another dead end. "Please," I said, leaning forward. "This is very important. It's about her father. He's passed." The young man's expression changed. "Oh, man. That's terrible. Liv, she talked about her dad sometimes. Seemed complicated." He thought for a second. "Look, I'm not supposed to do this, but she left her new work address for her last paycheck. Said she was going to be a gardener, working at one of those fancy high-rises downtown. The Ethelred Tower. Yeah, that was it. She works on their sky garden or something. He wrote the name on a napkin. I thanked him, my hand trembling as I took it. The Ethelred Tower. It sounded like something from one of my old books. I took another rideshare to the address. This building was the opposite of Olivia's old apartment. It was a mountain of new, shining glass and steel. I walked into a lobby that was bigger than the entire chapel at St. Catherine's. It was all marble and black leather. A severe-looking woman sat at a high desk. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice as cold as the marble. I am here to see Olivia Hayes," I said. "I'm her great-aunt. Genevieve Hayes." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Ms. Hayes doesn't take personal visitors during her shift. You'll have to contact her on her personal time." I was about to plead, to explain, when a door to the side opened. A young woman in a tan work uniform, her hair in a messy bun and a smudge of dirt on her cheek, walked out, holding a pair of garden shears. I stopped breathing. It was her. I didn't need to ask. She was Elias. She was my father. She had my family's face. The same strong jaw, the same straight nose. But her eyes were my mother's. The eyes I saw in the one, faded photograph I'd kept in my box for 62 years. She was the living, breathing proof of the family I had destroyed. She looked tired, and a little sad, but she walked with a purpose I recognized. It was the way Elias used to walk when he was heading to the paddock. She glanced at me, a polite, indifferent look for an old woman in the lobby, and then she did a double take. She squinted. She didn't know why she was looking. But she was. Some animal part of her recognized something in me. My heart was a drum. I was looking at my brother's daughter. I was looking at my niece. "Olivia?" I whispered. Olivia stopped. She looked from me to the concierge, her brow furrowed. "I'm Olivia. Can I help you?" Her voice was low and wary. She was a woman used to being on her guard. The concierge sniffed. "This woman says she's your great-aunt, Ms. Hayes. Genevieve Hayes." Olivia's face went blank. It was a perfect, sudden mask. The name meant nothing to her. "I think you have the wrong person," she said, her voice turning flat and professional. "I don't have a great-aunt." She started to turn away. "Elias," I said, my voice coming out louder than I expected. "Your father. Elias Hayes. He was my brother." That stopped her. She turned back fully, her eyes, my mother's eyes, narrowing. She studied my face, searching. "My father's sister, he told me she died. He said his whole family died. In a fire. Ages ago." I flinched. The word fire hit me like a physical slap. "He believed that, I think," I said, my voice trembling. He was wrong. I didn't die." Olivia looked at me, at my old-fashioned clothes, my white hair, my shaking hands. The confusion on her face was painful to watch. "Who are you?" she asked, and the simple question felt like a judgment. "My name is Genevieve Hayes," I said. "I've been away for a very long time." "Your father." "Elias, he passed away 2 weeks ago." The color drained from her face. The mask didn't just crack, it shattered. "What?" No, he's... I just talked to him. A few months ago. He's not dead." "I'm so sorry, my dear," I said, taking a step closer. "It was his heart. The lawyer just found me. I'm the executor of his will. He left this for you." I touched the bag. He left a box. Olivia leaned against the marble wall, breathing fast. I don't understand. I don't understand. She looked past me, at nothing, her mind clearly reeling. The concierge, seeing a real human drama unfold, suddenly looked uncomfortable. Perhaps, she said, her voice softer, you'd like to use the private lounge. She led us to a small, quiet room with plush chairs. Olivia sank into one. She was in her 30s, I guessed. A woman who looked like she'd been fighting the world her whole life. And, I realized with a fresh wave of sickness, she had been. Because of me. He's really gone, she whispered, looking at her dirt-stained hands. I'm so very sorry, I said, sitting opposite her. I never met him. Not as a man. I only knew him as a boy. My brother. Why? She asked, her voice hardening. The shock was already giving way to anger. It was the Hayes family way. Why now? Why you? He told me they were all dead. He said he was the only one who survived the fire. His whole life, he was a ghost. He never told me about his family, his past, nothing. And now he's dead, and you, a nun? She asked, gesturing at my plain, severe dress. I said. I was a nun for 62 years. I left the convent 3 weeks ago. Your father's will, it demanded it. That, finally, seemed to land. She looked up, her eyes sharp and intelligent. It demanded it? He demanded you leave your convent? Why? This was it. The moment. The cliff edge. I could lie. I could soften it. I could say he wanted to reunite his family. But I'd been lying for 62 years. I was so tired of it. Tell her the truth, Genevieve. He demanded it, I said, my voice a low rasp, because he wanted me to tell you the truth. The truth about the fire. The truth about why he left. The truth about me. Olivia stared at me. The air in the expensive room was still. What truth? She said. What did you do? She knew. Instinctively, she knew the sin was mine. Your father, I began, my hands twisting in my lap, was the best of us. He was kind and strong. Our father, his father, was a hard, cruel man. The ranch was failing. And I was 19. I was foolish, and I was a coward. I told her about the algebra paper. About the secret cigarette. About the spark in the dry hay. I told her how I ran. How I hid on the porch. How I watched Elias, her father, run into the flames. I told her how he tried to save our father, how he burned his own arms doing it. And I told her how I let him take the blame. How I stood there, silent, in that hospital room, and let our father curse him. How I let my father die believing his son had killed him. And how I let Elias walk away, disinherited and broken, with the word murderer hanging over his head. I kept my eyes on her face. At first, it was confusion. Then, as the story unfolded, her expression turned to sheer, uncomprehending horror. Her mouth fell open. The blood drained from her face, leaving her pale as wax. She was seeing it. The fire. The hospital room. The boy who was her father, being destroyed by the girl who was sitting in front of her. I was a coward, Olivia, I whispered, the tears finally coming, hot and useless. I was terrified. So I ran. I hid in the convent. I let your father live his whole life carrying my sin. I let the world believe he was a reckless fool who killed his own father. And I just hid. I finished. The confession, 62 years of it, was out. It hung in the air between us, toxic and suffocating. Olivia just stared at me. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She was perfectly, terrifyingly still. She looked at me for a long, silent minute, as if she was trying to see the 19-year-old monster inside the 81-year-old woman. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was not a shout. It was a low, cold, dead whisper, a voice so full of a lifetime of pain and a new, terrible understanding that it cut me deeper than any knife. My father, she said, was the saddest man I have ever known. He could never be present. He was always looking over his shoulder. He was terrified of fire. He'd have panic attacks if I lit a birthday candle. He could never hold a job for long. He could never love me. Not really. He was always a ghost. She stood up, her entire body shaking. And it was you. It was all you. I tried to speak. Olivia, Get away from me, she hissed, her voice vibrating with a rage that was terrifying to behold. You thing. You're not my aunt. You're a monster. You let him live like that? You let me grow up with a broken man, because you were scared? She was breathing hard, her eyes wild. I have nothing to say to you. Give me the box. Give me my father's box. I fumbled in the bag and handed it to her. She snatched it from my hand. Don't you ever contact me again. Do you understand me? You stay away from me. She turned and ran from the room, leaving me alone in the silent, plush lounge, shattered by the truth. I don't know how long I sat in that lounge. 1 hour. Maybe 2. The severe-looking woman from the front desk eventually poked her head in. Ma'am? Are you all right? I looked up. I must have been a sight. An old woman, weeping silently in a leather chair. I had no answer. I just nodded, slowly got to my feet, my old bones protesting, and walked out of that glass tower. The bright, hot Texas sun felt like an accusation. I had done it. I had obeyed Elias. I had told the truth. And, just as I had feared, the truth had been a balm. It hadn't healed anything. It had just ripped open a new, deeper wound. Olivia's words echoed in my head. He could never love me. Not really. He was a ghost. It was all you. I took a taxi back to my hotel. I lay on the bed, still in my slacks and blouse, and stared at the ceiling. The joy and energy of the city, which had felt so alien, now felt like a personal mockery. The world was full of life, but I was a vessel of death. I had brought nothing but ruin to my family. My father was dead. My brother was dead, having lived a shadow of a life. And my niece, a woman I had just met, I had probably broken her. I had taken the sad, incomplete memory of her father and replaced it with the image of a tortured, broken victim. I had given her a monster for an aunt. I had given her a legacy of shame. I thought, this is my true punishment. Not the 62 years of scrubbing floors and pretending to pray. This was it. To be 81, alone in a strange hotel room, having just destroyed the only family I had left. The beige room in Tulsa seemed like a paradise now. At least there, I was just a quiet old woman. Here, I was the cause of a tragedy. I finally understood why Elias had demanded this. It wasn't about forgiveness for me. It was about understanding for her. He needed Olivia to know that his sadness, his distance, his ghosts, they weren't her fault. He had been carrying a weight so heavy that he couldn't reach for his own daughter. And he was too broken, too ashamed, to tell her himself. So he used me. His killer. He used me as the key to unlock his own daughter's heart. It was a brilliant, terrible, and selfless final act. I stayed in that room for 2 days. I ordered food, something the hotel called room service, and ate crackers and drank tea. I watched the images flicker on the television, not understanding any of them. I was waiting. I didn't know what for. For Olivia to call? For the police to come? For my own heart to finally, mercifully, give out? I was a coward. I had been a coward at 19, and I was a coward at 81. I had run to the convent, and now I was running to this hotel room. The only brave thing I had ever done was tell the truth, and it had been a catastrophe. On the third morning, I made a decision. I couldn't go back to Tulsa. Not yet. I couldn't leave this unresolved. I couldn't let my final act on this earth be another explosion. I had to at least try to put one stone back on top of another. I had to find her again. Not for my sake. Not for my forgiveness. But for hers. I had to show her that the story didn't end with the fire. That the Hayes family, as broken and toxic as it was her family. And that she was not, as her father had been, alone. I had to show her the one piece of my past I didn't hate. The one thing I'd kept in my box for 62 years. I checked out of the hotel. I went back to the daily grind, the coffee shop. It seemed like the only place in the city I knew. I sat at my corner table, drank my tea, and waited. I didn't know if she would ever come back here. It was a foolish plan. A hope, and hope was a dangerous, unfamiliar feeling. I waited all day. The morning rush, the lunch lull, the afternoon pickup. Nothing. The sun started to set. The barista, the same young man as before, came over to wipe my table. "You again, Han," he said, not unkindly. "We're closing in about 20 minutes. I nodded, my heart sinking. Of course, she wasn't here. Why would she be? I'll go, I said. I stood up, and as I turned to the door, it opened. It was her. Olivia. She wasn't in her work uniform. She was in jeans and a t-shirt. Her eyes were red and swollen. She had clearly been crying for 2 days. She stopped dead when she saw me. Her whole body tensed, ready to bolt. "Wait," I said, holding up a hand. "Please. Just 5 minutes. That's all I ask. Then I will go. I will go back to Tulsa, and you will never, ever see me again. I promise." She stared at me, her chest rising and falling. She was trapped between her rage and a desperate, aching need for something. For answers. For an ending. She gave a short, angry nod and slid into the booth, as far away from me as she could get. 5 minutes, she said, her voice raw. Olivia sat across from me, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She looked like a cornered animal. "What?" she finally said. "What else could you possibly have to say?" I reached into my bag. It wasn't the wooden box I pulled out. It was a small, worn tin, the kind that used to hold fancy biscuits. It was the only thing I'd brought with me from the ranch. The only thing I'd kept in my cell for 62 years. "Your father, he told you I died in the fire," I said softly. "He was wrong. But our mother, she did die. When I was 6, and he was 9. I opened the tin. Inside, there was only one thing. A single, faded, sepia-toned photograph. It was the only one we had. I pushed it across the table. Olivia looked down at it. It was a picture of a young woman, beautiful, with kind, sad eyes, holding the hand of a little boy in overalls. That boy was Elias. Standing next to her, in a little dress, was me. "That's our mother," I said. "And that's your father. Before everything. Before our father, his father, became so hard. Before the ranch died." Olivia picked up the photo, her fingers trembling. She stared at it. She was staring at her grandmother's face. She was staring at her father's 9-year-old, innocent face. He was just a kid, she whispered, a fresh tear rolling down her cheek and dropping onto the old photograph. I said. He was a good brother. He used to carve things. Little birds, out of scraps of wood. He tried to teach me. He was always trying to fix things. He fixed the fence, he fixed the tractor, he tried to fix our father. I took a deep breath. What I did to him, Olivia, it was unforgivable. I know that. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I never will. But your father, he was more than the sad man you knew. He was a good man. A good boy. And my lie, it didn't just haunt him. It erased him. It erased our mother. It erased our whole family. It left him with nothing but the fire. You said he was a ghost. You were right. I made him one. I paused, my voice thick. I think he sent me here and made me tell you, so you would know that you weren't the reason he was sad. It was never you. It was me. It was 1959. He was carrying a weight he shouldn't have been, and he was just tired. He was so tired. Olivia didn't say anything. She just stared at the picture. Then, slowly, she put her hand on the wooden box she'd brought with her. It was on the table between us. I haven't opened it, she said, her voice muffled. I've been afraid to. I think he wanted you to have this picture, I said. I think maybe we should open it together. She looked up at me, her eyes red and searching. She gave a small nod. She slid the box toward the middle of the table. It wasn't locked. It was just sealed with old, yellowed packing tape. My hands, twisted with arthritis, fumbled with the edge. Olivia, with her young, steady hands, took over. She broke the seal. The sound was loud in the quiet, empty coffee shop. She opened the lid. The first thing inside was a letter. A simple white envelope, with Olivia written on the front in a strong, clear, but slightly shaky hand. Her hand. She picked it up, but didn't open it. Not yet. Beneath it, the box was full of things. Not money. Not jewels. Memories. There was a photograph, a newer one, of a little girl with pigtails on a swing. That's me, Olivia whispered, a small, choked sound. There was a bronze star, the kind you get in the military. He served in Vietnam, she said. He never, ever talked about it. There was a dried, pressed wildflower. There was a baby's rattle, cheap and plastic. And then, at the very bottom, there was a small, beautifully carved wooden bird. A wren. I gasped. It was the one he'd carved for me, the summer I was 10. I thought it had been lost in the fire. He had saved it. He had kept it. For his whole life. I was sobbing now, the dry, silent sobs of an old woman who had forgotten how. He had forgiven me. Sometime, in the last 62 years, in a life I never got to see, he had forgiven me. Olivia watched me, her face a storm of confusion and grief. Then, her hands shaking, she opened the letter. She read it silently, her eyes scanning the page. I watched her face. I saw her eyes go wide. I saw her hand go to her mouth. She read a passage, and her gaze lifted, locking with mine. He writes about you, she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. What does he say? I asked, terrified. She took a shaky breath and read from the page. My sister Genevieve. I have not seen her since we were children. But I know she is alive. I have spent my life angry at her. Angry at our father. Angry at the world. But the anger is a poison, Livy. It poisoned me. It kept me from being the father you deserved. I am sending her to you. Not for her sake, but for yours. She is the only one who knows the combination to the lock. She has the truth. And the truth, it's the only thing I have to give you. It's the only inheritance that matters. I hope it sets you free. Don't hate her. She was just a scared kid. We all were. We sat in the silence of the closed coffee shop. The young barista was quietly wiping counters, pretending not to watch us. He had locked the doors, but he hadn't made us leave. Olivia folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. She reached into the box and her fingers closed around the small wooden bird. She rolled it in her palm, staring at it. He kept this, she said. It wasn't a question. He kept it his whole life. This little bird. And this picture of you. She looked at me, and for the first time, the rage in her eyes was gone. It had been replaced by a grief so profound, so deep, it felt as ancient as the red dirt we came from. All this time, she whispered, I thought he didn't love me. I thought I was not enough. I thought I was the reason he was so sad. He was just stuck. I stuck him, I said, my voice raw. My silence. My cowardice. I built the cage, Olivia. He just lived in it. We both did, she said, her voice quiet. He never left that hospital room. And he put me in there with him. He never told me why. She looked at the box, at the small, sad collection of a broken man's life. And she looked at me, the 81-year-old woman who was the key to it all. He said, Don't hate her. She was just a scared kid, she repeated, testing the words. She looked at my face, at my wrinkles, at my liver-spotted hands. Were you? She asked. Were you just a scared kid? I thought back to that girl, that 19-year-old, foolish, selfish girl on the porch, listening to her brother scream. I said. I was terrified. Of my father. Of the fire. Of being blamed. Of being nothing. But it's not an excuse. A scared kid can still be a monster. Maybe, Olivia said, closing the box. But I don't think my father saw you as one. Not at the end. He saw you as a witness. The only other person on earth who knew. She stood up. I tensed, expecting her to walk out again. To leave me for good. But she just slung her bag over her shoulder, the box tucked carefully under her arm. Where are you staying? She asked. A hotel. Just for tonight. I was going to go back to Tulsa tomorrow. No, she said. It wasn't a question. You're not. You're 81 years old, and you're in a strange city. It's not right. She sighed, a long, ragged sound, as if she was setting down a weight she'd been carrying her whole life. I have a small apartment. It has a couch. You can stay. For a few days. We have to figure this out. I was stunned. Olivia, you don't have to do that. After what I know, she cut me off. I'm not forgiving you. I don't know if I can. I'm so angry. Her eyes flashed. But I'm angry at him, too. For leaving me. For making this drama, his last act. And I'm angry at your father. My grandfather. The man who cursed his own son. She shook her head. It's a whole family of ghosts. And right now, you're the only one I can actually talk to. She offered me a hand. A truce. Not forgiveness. Not love. Just a truce. I looked at her hand, her young, strong hand, stained with dirt from her garden. I placed my old, twisted, pale hand in hers. She pulled me to my feet. We walked out of the coffee shop. The night air was cool. The young barista just nodded at us as we left. I live this way, she said, and we just walked. In silence. Two strangers, bound by a 62-year-old fire. Her apartment was small, but it was alive. It was filled with plants. Dozens of them. On the windowsills, on shelves, hanging from the ceiling. It was a jungle. It smelled of damp earth and life. It's my thing, she said, seeing me look. After my father. I needed to be around things that grow. She made me a cup of tea. She set up blankets and a pillow on her sofa. It was lumpy, but it felt like the finest bed in the world. We didn't talk much more that night. We were both exhausted. But as I lay on the couch, in the dark, surrounded by the smell of living plants and the quiet breathing of my niece in the next room, I knew I was no longer in a prison. The beige room was a prison. The convent was a prison. This was something else. I was still a guest. I was still a pariah. But I was in the same house as my family. For the first time in 62 years. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I didn't see the fire. I saw a small, carved, wooden bird. And I saw the face of a little boy, my brother, Elias, smiling. I stayed on that couch for a week. It was the strangest week of my life. It was a slow, awkward dance of two people who shared blood but nothing else. Olivia would go to work in her garden, and I would stay in the apartment, surrounded by her plants. I learned how to use her coffee machine. I learned how to use the television remote. I watched the news. The world was so loud. I would read the books on her shelves. She was a reader, like me. It was the first, tiny piece of me I saw in her. When she came home, covered in dirt, we would eat. Sometimes we'd talk. Simple, shallow things. How was work? It was hot. The news said there is a storm coming. We need the rain. But in between the simple words, other, heavier things were being said. She would ask me questions. Not about the fire. Not yet. About before. What was she like? She asked one night. Our grandmother. The one in the picture. And I told her. I told her about her smell, like flower and lavender. I told her how she used to sing, off-key. I told her how she would stand up to our father, the only one who dared. I was giving Olivia her history. I was filling in the pages that my brother, in his pain, had torn out. And in telling her, I was remembering, too. I was remembering a life before the lie. I was remembering Genevieve. On the 5th day, she came home from work and found me holding the small wooden bird. You should keep that, she said. He carved it for you. No, I said, holding it out to her. He kept it for you. He kept it to show you where he came in. He kept it to show you the small, good part. It belongs to you. She took it. We were building a bridge, one small, true thing at a time. The next day, she said, I took some time off. I want to go somewhere. Where? I asked. Home, she said. I want to see it. The ranch. Where it happened. I had not been back to Oklahoma. To that place. The thought made me sick. But I looked at her face, her determined, Hayes family face, and I knew I had no choice. Okay, I said. We'll go. We rented a car, another terrifying, magical experience for me, and she drove. We drove north, out of the bright, living world of Austin, and back into the flat, red, dusty land of my childhood. Back into the past. We drove for 8 hours. She found the land using the map on her glowing rectangle. The church had sold it, years ago. It was just an empty field now. The house was gone. The paddock was gone. There was nothing. Just wind, and red dirt, and an old, broken-down fence line. We got out of the car. The wind was hot, and it smelled of dust and dry grass. It was the same smell. The smell of the fire. "This is it?" she asked. "This is it," I said. I walked, my old legs unsteady, across the field, to a place where the grass grew differently. A patch of scorched earth, where nothing, even after 62 years, seemed to want to grow. "This was the barn," I said. We stood there, on the grave of my family, for a long time. The wind whipped our hair. "I'm so sorry, Elias," I whispered. I wasn't praying. I wasn't talking to God. I was talking to my brother. "I'm so sorry. I was a coward. And I love you." Olivia stood next to me. She didn't say anything. She just reached out and took my hand. Her hand was warm and strong. Mine was cold and papery. We just stood there, two women on a patch of dead-end land, holding hands. She was crying. I was crying. After a while, she let go, and she knelt. She had brought a small bag with her. From it, she took a trowel and a small, green, living plant in a plastic pot. It was a seedling. "What is that?" I asked. "It's an oak tree," she said. "They're native. They're strong. They can handle the drought." She dug a small hole right in the center of where the barn had been. She planted the tree. She packed the red dirt around its base with her bare hands. She watered it from a bottle she'd brought. She stood up, wiping her hands on her jeans. "There," she said. "Something new. Something that grows." We walked back to the car. We didn't look back. We drove back to Austin, mostly in silence. But it wasn't the silence of the convent or the silence of my beige room. It was a shared silence. It was the silence of two people who had seen the same ghost and had finally, together, decided to let it rest. I am still in Austin. I never went back to the beige room. Olivia and we found a small apartment, a 2-bedroom in a quiet building for seniors. She moved me in. She visits me. She brings me plants. I am teaching her how to knit. She is teaching me how to use the internet. It is slow. And it is hard. She has not said the words "I forgive you." Maybe she never will. That's her right. But she calls me. She called me yesterday. "Hey, Aunt Jenna," she said, "I'm bringing dinner. Don't try to use the microwave again. Just wait for me. My name is Genevieve Hayes. I am 81 years old. I am not a nun. I am not a ghost. I am not a coward. I am just Genevieve. An old woman with a family. A woman who, at the very end of her life, finally learned the weight of her own name. And it's a good weight. It's a weight I can carry. Genevieve didn't find the forgiveness she thought she was looking for, but she found something more, a family. She and Olivia are starting to heal. What do you think is the most important part of forgiveness? Is it saying the words, or is it the act of showing up, planting a tree, and just being there? Thank you for listening to my story. Share your thoughts below.